This man plummeted from space to Earth and tragically lost his life in the process. What sounds like a made-up internet legend actually happened. American intelligence agencies intercepted his last words over the radio, while his spacecraft had long since spun out of control.
Make sure to stay until the end to see the incredible original footage. Let's get started. Yes, this crazy story takes us back to the year 1967. Feel free to write to me and let me know who among you was already born back then or even actively experienced the 60s. I'm curious to see what the average age is here. And if true and insane stories from space history fascinate you as much as they do me, then please feel free to subscribe to the channel now. It doesn't cost anything. You'll never miss a video again, and you'll help me immensely to continue my work. And for those who have already subscribed, you support the video a lot with a thumbs up. 5,000 likes should be enough to appease the YouTube algorithm. Thanks, guys. In 1967, the Soviet Union celebrated the 50th anniversary of the October Revolution, and as is fitting for a socialist jubilee, space travel was expected to provide a suitable gift. The plan behind it was, let's say, ambitious. 2 brand new Soyuz spacecraft were to launch into space, dock with each other in orbit, and even exchange crew members. And this with a spacecraft that had never before carried a human into space. What could possibly go wrong? On board Soyuz, one was the experienced test pilot and cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov.
One day later, Soyuz 2 was scheduled to follow, carrying 3 more cosmonauts. It was to dock, and 2 of them were then supposed to literally crawl from one spacecraft to the other during a spacewalk. It sounds reckless, and it really is, because while the Soviet propaganda machine was already preparing the headlines, many engineers knew in secret that this spacecraft was anything but ready. During an inspection, technicians reportedly discovered no fewer than 203 technical defects in the Soyuz capsule, some of them life-threatening. A 10-page memo was drafted listing all the problems. There was just one small problem. No one dared to actually present this memo to Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev. Komarov's colleagues are even said to have tried to persuade him to simply refuse the flight. But Komarov knew full well that if he refused, his good friend Yuri Gagarin, the first human in space and a great national hero of the Soviet Union, would be sent in his place. Gagarin, however, was just as aware as Komarov himself of how dangerous this flight would be. Together, they are said to have tried to stop the entire mission, to no avail, so Komarov decided to fly, knowing full well that he might be signing his own death warrant. According to legend, he asked for only one thing. If anything were to happen to him, he wanted a public funeral where his coffin would be displayed open so that everyone could see what had happened to him. On launch day, April 23, 1967, Gagarin is said to have insisted, contrary to standard protocol, on wearing his own pressure suit just so he could be allowed onto the launch pad, perhaps a last-ditch attempt to stop the launch. It didn't help. Soyuz 1 lifted off on schedule, and Komarov did indeed reach Earth's orbit. The joy was short-lived, however, because shortly after reaching orbit, one of the 2 solar panels failed to deploy. As a result, Komarov's capsule had only half the energy originally planned, and the jam panel also interfered with the sensors of the attitude control system. Komarov tried everything imaginable, even shaking the entire spacecraft with pressure-like maneuvers in the hope that the panel would finally come loose.
In vain. Ground control in Moscow quickly realized the gravity of the situation. The planned launch of Soyuz 2 was cancelled. The entire docking maneuver was therefore history. From now on, it was only about one thing: getting Komarov back to Earth alive somehow. What was actually said over the radio between Komarov and the ground station that night has not been fully clarified to this day. And that is exactly what makes this story so eerie.
According to the book Starman, the truth behind the legend of Yuri Gagarin, American listening stations in Turkey are said to have picked up Komarov's very last words. Translated and heavily paraphrased, he's said to have shouted into the microphone, cursing, "This damn ship! Nothing I touch here works right." The official Soviet radio logs, on the other hand, told a completely different, highly whitewashed version of the story. According to them, Komarov reportedly calmly reported that he was doing excellently and that everything was in perfect order, shortly before thanking the ground station for the transmission and confirming the successful separation of the re-entry capsule. And then, according to this official log, there was suddenly complete radio silence. The ground station, callsign Sarja, repeatedly and desperately tried to establish contact with the capsule, callsign Reuben. Again and again, the flight controller repeated virtually the same question into the microphone without ever receiving a response. During re-entry into the atmosphere, Komarov actually had to manually orient his spacecraft because the automatic attitude control system was not functioning properly due to the defective panel. He briefly managed to position the capsule correctly, but he could not maintain that orientation. Due to its unstable orientation, Soyuz 1 generated no aerodynamic lift whatsoever and instead began to spin completely out of control. The capsule fell from the sky practically like a stone, and that is precisely where the macabre nickname that Komarov still bears today comes from.
The man who fell from space. When the landing capsule finally hit the Earth, it did so with a force that scientists later compared to the impact of a 2.8-ton meteorite. The capsule was completely crushed, and ironically, the landing rockets, which were supposed to cushion the final impact, ignited due to the impact itself and set the wreckage on fire.
When the rescue team arrived, they initially found only a smoking crater, and tragically, one detail was missing from the entire crash site: and deployed parachute. Komarov's official cause of death was multiple injuries to the skull, spine, and skeleton caused by the violent impact. What the Soviet press release omitted at the time was the complete crash itself, as well as the parachute that had apparently failed. Strangely enough, however, this photo was later published, showing high-ranking Soviet officials standing in front of Komarov's remains. According to contemporary records, Komarov's remains were first photographed on the orders of high-ranking officials and then cremated. His ashes were later interred in the Kremlin wall during a state funeral. But back to the parachute, it later became the central mystery of the entire investigation. Of the capsule's two parachutes, the smaller brake parachute had opened correctly, but the main parachute remained completely stuck in its container, even though the exact same system had functioned flawlessly in all previous tests.
Various theories subsequently circulated. Some suspected that the parachute had been too large for its container and had therefore been packed in much too tightly. Soviet space engineer Boris Chertok later introduced a different explanation. The capsule had been coated with a sticky heat shield layer, which was applied in a closed autoclave, i.e., a gas-tight sealable pressure vessel.
And of all things, the parachute compartment on Komarov's capsule had not been properly covered. The viscous polymer could therefore have seeped directly into it and literally glued the main parachute shut. Whether a functioning parachute would have saved Komarov, however, remains unclear to this day. Many historians believe that given the truly numerous other problems, the mission would have been nearly impossible to survive anyway. Despite this tragedy, the Soyuz program went on to become, in the decades that followed, the most successful and longest-running manned spaceflight program in human history. To this day, nearly 60 years later, modified Soyuz capsules continue to carry cosmonauts into space and back. Improvements to parachute systems and materials, ultimately, all of this can be traced back to that bitter lesson learned on that night in April 1967.
I find the story fascinating in a morbid way because it shows how much political pressure and the desire for prestige can decide between life and death. A system in which no one dared to pass on a warning letter ended up costing the life of a man who knew exactly what was coming, yet still boarded to protect a friend. This friend, Yuri Gagarin, incidentally died just 1 year later in a training flight accident. To this day, the exact circumstances remain unclear, and there are many rumors that they wanted to get rid of him, who was also known as a critical voice, especially after the avoidable death of his good friend Vladimir Komarov. Of course, we cannot know or evaluate the exact background details here and now.
But regardless of whether it was gross negligence or intent, it vividly illustrates why authoritarian centralized systems like the Soviet Union do not function well. When everyone fears the consequences that will ensue if central decision makers are confronted with the truth, they prefer to remain silent and cover things up, and in the end that costs human lives. Other extreme examples can be found in China under Mao or Cambodia under Pol Pot. This political system simply doesn't work.
Sometimes you get the feeling that some people among us have unfortunately forgotten that these days, but I don't want to get too political here. For more exciting space stories, don't forget to follow me on this channel now, and remember to hit the thumbs up so we can break the 5,000 likes mark. Let's now travel from the 60s to the 40s of the last century.
Deep within the radioactive debris from the atomic bomb explosion in Hiroshima, researchers have just discovered a completely new type of material, born, so to speak, from the nuclear fire. In the video at the top right, I'll show you exactly how an atomic bomb can create a completely new material and what it's all about. Be sure to check it out, it's super exciting. As always, at the bottom right, you'll find another topic related to science and space. Otherwise, I'd say see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.